Hello, and welcome to the series of online training modules on parents with disabilities and child welfare. This training is a collaborative effort between faculty at the University of Minnesota School of Social Work and the Center for Advanced Studies in Child Welfare at the School of Social Work, University of Minnesota. This training module is part of an online training effort that covers a wide range of topic areas in child welfare. This is part 2 of a series on parents with disabilities and child welfare. In this module, I'm going to talk about parental supports for parents with disabilities and child welfare, including current research findings in this area. Welcome to the online training series. After completing this section of the training, you should have a broad understanding of the concept of parental supports for parents with disabilities. People who complete this training will understand the concept of supports for people with disabilities, distinguish between individual supports and parental supports, identify various types of parental supports for parents with disabilities, and understand how the concept of parental supports are important for child welfare. First, we will cover the topic of supports for persons with disabilities in general. The concept of supports is important for understanding how all people interact and is particularly useful for thinking about how we provide services to people with disabilities. In fact, the introduction of the idea of individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities as needing supports was a crucial step for the American Association on Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities, because this concept is different from the medical model of disability, which is focused on individuals' deficiencies. In the 11th edition of the AAIDD manual, supports are defined as, quote, resources and strategies that aim to promote the development, education, interests, and personal well-being of a person and that enhance individual functioning. Why are supports important? Supports are seen as important for these individuals participating in a variety of life domains, including social roles, which are defined as valid activities considered normative for a specific age group. Think about the social roles that people have. Valid activities considered normative for people of a specific age. For example, for children, an important social role might be to be a student, or a friend, or a son or a daughter. For adults, important social roles might be employee, neighbor, member of a religious organization, a teammate on a softball team, or a friend or family member. An important social role that is normative for many adults is the role of being a parent. However, supports for this important social role, the role of being a parent, has received little attention in the field of disability services and supports. This is where the new concept of parental supports comes in. Supports in general are technologies or personal supports designed to enhance individual functioning. Parental supports are technologies and personal supports that are designed to adapt family functioning. This is where the new concept of parental supports comes in. Parental supports for parenting activities for persons with disabilities can be defined similarly to the notion of supports developed by AAIDD. As supports in general for this population are thought to be technologies or personal supports that enhance individual functioning, parental supports are simply technologies or personal supports that enhance family functioning in families headed by a parent or guardian with a disability. Technologies can include any adaptive equipment that may assist an individual in parenting, such as adaptive cribs or childcare equipment, cooking or feeding equipment, or a smartphone or personal digital assistants that present step-by-step guidelines for parenting activities. Personal supports can include any support designed to assist parents or guardians with a disability to compensate for those aspects of their disability that affect their ability to care for their child or their children and will enable them to fulfill their parenting responsibilities. These types of personal supports could include daycare services, respite care, a co-parent or parent mentor, in-home parenting training, housekeeping, or homework tutoring. Similar to the notion that supports help individuals with disabilities fill the gaps between their own competencies and environmental demands, parental supports are designed to help individuals with disabilities fill their gaps in parenting competencies and environmental demands related to parenting. Here are two lists of examples of parental supports. Technological supports are on the left and personal supports are on the right. Take a minute to view the examples of parental supports that parents with disabilities might need to assist them in parenting. Next, dig deeper into the concept of parental supports by reading the following article about parental supports, which was published in the journal Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. You can find the article at the Digital Conservancy at the University of Minnesota. After you have finished reading the article, you can go on to the next page. There are currently few formal sources of support to assist parents with disabilities in the role of parenting. Of the few programs that do exist across the country, a number of them focus more on increasing individual parenting ability rather than providing ongoing parental supports to assist parents with disabilities and their children. One of the reasons for this is that funding streams are currently not designed to support parenting. Funding streams are designed to support individual supports to enhance individual functioning, but not parental supports to enhance family functioning. Thus, many parents with disabilities have to rely on informal supports, such as support from family members, friends, neighbors, or people in their religious communities. While many people with disabilities prefer these types of supports, there are also big gaps in formal supports that could assist them with parenting. Parents with disabilities can be at high risk for losing their children in the child welfare system. Tools for measuring supports typically focus on individual supports. For example, the supports intensity scale is very useful for measuring individual supports for parents with disabilities. Review the following sample case study applying the supports intensity scale. Think of how a scale like this could be modified for working with parents with disabilities to help determine the supports needed and/or received by parents with disabilities to enhance family functioning. When you have reviewed the case study and thought about applying the supports intensity scale to parents with disabilities, you can go on to the next page. It makes little sense to assess individual functioning or develop individual supports for individual functioning when a person with a disability is a parent, because the parent-child relationship is a paramount part of a parent's life. The Rocking the Cradle report from the National Council on Disability has a chapter on types of appropriate supports for parents with disabilities. This chapter explores various supports available to parents with disabilities and their families. Many of the supports discussed in this chapter already exist and need only be expanded or modified to better serve parents with disabilities and their families. Others are supports that do not exist and must be established. Next, read Chapter 13 of the National Council on Disabilities' Rocking the Cradle report for examples of community supports. When you have read Chapter 13, you can go on to the next page. The child welfare system has been slow in recognizing the concept of interdependent parenting that underlies the concept of parental supports. However, new models of child welfare, such as family assessment or differential response, are more in line with the concept of parental supports and interdependent parenting. As these models are increasingly adopted throughout the country, parents with disabilities may be better served as more child welfare workers and courts are understanding the concept of parental supports and family functioning. Over the last decade, several states have changed their child welfare statutes to include language requiring courts to take into account the parental support needs that individual parents can use to successfully parent. Idaho was the first state to include affirmative action in its state child welfare statute, resulting from a multi-year advocacy campaign culminating in the passage of new laws in the early 2000s. Idaho's new law now mandates that reasonable efforts to prevent foster care placement or termination of parental rights involving a parent or guardian with a disability shall include, quote, the consideration of adaptive equipment or support services that may enable the parent to remedy the reasons for removal of child. Thus, Idaho's law requires reasonable efforts to include considering parental supports for parents with disabilities. Next, read about the passage of Idaho's groundbreaking law. After you've finished reading this brief account, you can go on to the next page. The notion of parental supports fits well within the social model of disability and general conceptions of individual supports promoted by AAIDD. The concept of parental supports also fits within the person and the environment paradigm of social work and its ecological model. Finally, the concept of parental supports also fits within new trends in child welfare, such as alternative response or family assessment. Thus, while there are currently few formal programs supporting parents with disabilities and little funding sources to pay for formal or informal parental supports, the new state statutes that are emerging represent a shift in our thinking about parental supports for parents with disabilities. Innovative programs supporting parents with disabilities may emerge as child welfare agencies are increasingly required to examine how parents with disabilities can parent their children with the assistance of parental supports. We have now reached the end of this module on parental supports for parents with disabilities. To review, in this module, we talked about individual and parental supports. We covered types of parental supports for parents with disabilities, and we discussed how the concept of parental supports are important for child welfare practice.